What's up guys, and welcome back to another G37 video. This is the first modding video that we're gonna have for the G37, and it's a pretty big one. We're doing the coilover install on the G37 today. The G37 is equipped with some lowering springs from the previous owner. In my opinion though, I think it's a little too low, so I'm gonna go ahead and install some coilovers on the G37 today. So full disclosure, this video is sponsored by Maxpeedingrods. They did send out a set of coilovers for the G37 to install. So these are the bad boys that we're going to be installing on the G37 today, and these are the version 2 since they do have two different versions now. They have the OG versions that I've installed multiple times on the channel, and these are their V2. They're basically the revised version, so they are better than the version 1. One thing I do notice is they did a better job of covering everything, making sure that dust and water doesn't get into the coilover. And I also like that they went with a more subtle color instead of having it all yellow, which wasn't my favorite thing to have on the car. So like I said, these coilovers are upgraded and they basically have better oil in them, high performance oil. They also did use aluminum to make it lighter than their V1 counterpart. So I'm really excited to try these coilovers out. They do have adjustable dampening. They also have adjustable height without affecting the preload, which is a big feature that a lot of brands don't have still. These are the bad boys we're going to be installing on the G37 today, and it feels so weird to be saying G37 still. I don't feel like this is real that I own a G37 just because I've been wanting it for quite a bit. So let me go ahead and show you guys one more time how the G37 looks like height wise, so that way you guys get an idea. It is pretty low. I do scrape basically everywhere, so that's one of the downsides. Don't mind that scratch you just saw and this rust spot. We will get that taken care of, I promise. But this is the rear, and again, I have to put my hand in, up and over the wheel so I can go ahead and get into the fender liner. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jack up the G37 and get the wheels off so we can start installing the coilovers. I do have a question for you guys. What do you guys want to see on the G37? Like, what is the build that you guys would want to see with this? To be quite honest with you, since I got it for such a good deal, I didn't really think about what I was going to do with the G37. But now that I have one, I don't really know what to do with it. So if you guys have any ideas, let me know, because I would like to know. Alright guys, so we took off the wheel, and here the first thing I noticed right off the bat is we have stripped studs. The previous owner, of course, ended up torquing the living hell out of these things, and they just stripped. But besides that little mishap, we do have the lowering springs installed like I mentioned earlier, so it's not too crazy to install coilovers, to be honest with you. We just need to take off this line that's connected onto the strut. There is a bottom nut and bolt that is an 18, I believe, so we just need to remove the bottom nut. And there's 3 nuts at the top. Then we're just gonna have a couple cursing words, pull it out, and then put the new one back in. Put it back in so we can show that we took it out. Wow! Something I actually didn't know was that the sway bar end link from the G37 is an integrated bolt that is connected to the bottom of the strut. When you want to take off that nut, you're actually taking out the nut that is connected to a sway bar. So let's just say you strip the nut or you strip the threads on the bolt, you're gonna have to replace the whole sway bar end link because it is integrated into it. The other side of the sway bar end link was popped out, and it is literally stuck onto the sway bar. This is the OEM end link that came with the car. It's a Nissan one. I doubt they went and replaced it with another Nissan one. So that's great to know that there is no connected end link onto it. So everything is installed for this coilover. The only thing that I will point out is not a feature on these coilovers is the fact that you don't have the little stud for the brake line to go back on. You're left with this one hanging, and then there's also another one hanging on the other side. There is no bracket that allows you to put it back just like stock. That is something to note with these V2s. Even though they are version 2s of the coilovers, it still doesn't have a dedicated stud for specific cars. It's not a big deal for me because I'm just gonna run a zip tie and basically leave it like this. Alright guys, so we did take off the rear wheel. We're gonna tackle the rear coilovers now. So a couple things to note. One thing is that we are upgrading from the spring on the bucket, on the spring bucket, to a rear true coilover. That is an upgrade in my book. Just makes it easier. You don't have to deal with the spring. Also, sometimes dealing with the spring and having the collars on the bottom, adjusting them, trying to get everything perfect with the preload and the height can can be kind of a nightmare. All in one, super basic, super simple. You don't have to worry about anything else. So that's the end of the good news. Bad news, bad paint job on the caliper. Just, again, Mickey Mouse all over, cut corners. Does have wheel spacers. Bad thing, there is a stud missing, so it's actually held by 4. This one has messed up studs on the spacers themselves, so a lot of fixing has to be done. So this is going to be really simple. It's going to be harder to remove everything than it is to put everything back together. So before we install and disassemble everything, just realize that not only is there a spacer with a missing stud, there is a spacer on top of a spacer that is not hub-centric. So that's a whole nother thing safety wise that I'm concerned about and I don't want to risk. I'm cool with Mickey Mouse paint jobs. This safety wise is just not what I want to be risking. What I'm gonna do, take off this spacer in the back. It's your typical like AutoZone auto parts spacer. If you're gonna be running spacers, big PSA, get hub centric. It essentially goes on top of the ring, creates another ring for your wheel to be on there. It's not worth it for the 2 mil thickness that it's gonna give me, so I'm just gonna go ahead, remove it, put on this actual hub centric spacer, so that way I don't risk it. Yep. So this is exactly, I already knew what type of spacer was. Quickest way to explain it, and also here's the missing stud. What is this build, man? These are like a universal fit, so they just kind of float around. Let's say you had your wheel on and you just had this spacer. What your wheel really goes onto is this ring right here. That's what actually seats it, and then the bolts just secure it. But when you don't have a hub-centric spacer, the wheels are literally just riding on the lug nuts. You know, you could get lucky, never have an issue, but it's not worth the risk of having your wheel coming off when you're in the freeway, when you're driving in the city, or whenever, really. What I'm gonna do, take off the spacer. There's nothing, no ring at all. This one is hub centric, so you can see the ring right here. Never run these, for the love of God. All right, guys, so here is the part that if you weren't prepared for it and you were trying to knock this out in a couple hours, something you really want to take note of is this bolt is going to be reused, but the downside is the OEM shock actually has the nut welded onto the OEM shock. That is not the same on the Maxpeeding rods. So unfortunately, if you didn't know that information like us, go to the hardware store, get a nut that could go into this, and that way you could go ahead and install your rear coilover. Luckily, we have a nicely coated in rust bolt that we're going to be using. I wasn't expecting this, and you know, full disclosure, I wanted to share that with you guys. So just an FYI, in case you are installing these coilovers, make sure you get the appropriate size nut so that way you don't get stuck. So we ended up installing the rear coilovers, and we didn't show too much just because we're gonna go ahead and see what the fitment is. Right off the bat, if you come closer, you can see how tucked we are. That's essentially how they came from the box, so I just wanted to see how it looked like and adjust from there. This is actually lower with it raised up right now than it was when it was lowered. I don't know if we're gonna be able to jack it up, but we're gonna see how it looks just for the shits and giggles. And then the front, I think I'm gonna be pretty happy with. The front looks way better, so we're gonna take off the jack stands, but you can see the front I actually have some room to play with. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. And I can't pull it out. Well, that's... I think this is lower. Dude, this thing is so dirt nasty low. I think this is actually the lowest setting you can have. If you're looking to slam your G37, here you go. Now you can see how it looks like. Kind of sucks when you want to kind of get everything right the first try, but that's always kind of the thing. You don't really have an exact base to go off of just because the OEM is different sizing and stuff. We're going to have to jack it up and basically adjust the height all over again. Make sure that we have the proper height we want.
1 hour later.
Alright guys, so the height is adjusted on the rear. We ended up going a little bit higher in the rear, and we also went a little bit higher in the front. So in comparison to the Tain lower-end springs on the other side, we went a 1/4 of an inch higher, almost 1/2 inch of a difference. which is definitely going to help make sure that I don't scrape everywhere that I'm driving. I am going to be buying some different spacers and pull the wheel a little bit out just to make it look a little nicer. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and I'll catch you guys after I'm done. Alright guys, so everything is installed on the G37. The coilovers are installed and we're all good to go. Everything's torqued, wheels are good to go, and we're ready for the driving portion on the G37. Alright guys, so we are in the driving portion of the G37 installing the coilovers. One thing we did notice right off the bat from driving them straight out of the box, you do have to adjust the nut by using 2 wrenches, basically tightening the nut, making sure it's super tight. Maxpeedingrods just kind of doesn't do it at all, so even in the version 1 that was an issue that makes you think that, you know, the coilovers are knocking. No different in the V2, so went ahead, tightened all the nuts. Feels a lot better than the OEM with the lowering springs, just because lowering springs on OEM shock is just a no-no. This feels a lot smoother, which is a really good sign. These are going for like $400 if you use my discount code, which I do think they're really good for that price range. Even these version 2s are cheaper than all of the competitors' coilovers, even Tane, Trueheart, Godspeed, all of those. That doesn't mean they're gonna last you as long as higher end ones, but for the price, whether you're in a tight budget or you just don't want to spend too much money on some coilovers, I think these are good for that price range of what they are. You may not get all the features that the higher end ones get, but it's also not trying to be a high-end coilover, which is an important thing to think about. So that's going to be out for this G37 video. That was the first mod on the G37. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned something. Again, there will be a discount code in the link below in the description. Go ahead and check it out if you want to get yourself a pair of coilovers for your car. I know this video was the first mod video before I did all the maintenance. I will be addressing that in the next videos. There's a lot of stuff that still needs to be fixed on this car, so I will be showing you guys that. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.